Hello and welcome to another edition of Tribulation Ready Survival. This is part 2 of our multi-part series, Basic Prepping or Prepping 101, whatever you want to call it. So in this, I've done some research, I found some passages and not just a couple of verses. I'm talking about entire stories that God had written for showing us that He wants us to prepare. He wants us to prepare our hearts for the things to come. He wants our hearts ready so that when He comes back, we have what we need. We're going to go over the parable of the 10 virgins. We're going to go over some other things. The Bible is, I believe, the original prepping handbook. No joke. From Joseph in the Bible, when he stored up all that food when Egypt was going into a famine. We have Noah. He had to store up tons and tons of food on that boat and water and all those things. God provided that for him. So there's stories in there throughout the Bible for being prepared in many different ways. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read these selected passages to you, and I will put them up on the screen, and I'll also add some extras down at the bottom that are not included in here but also are pertinent. But I would encourage you to look up, just do a word study on the word prepared or preparation. Wow. Okay? You're going to come over so many different places where it is. And in fact, we do this as Torah followers. We do this every single week. Because on Friday for us, it's known as Erev Shabbat or Preparation Day. You are to prepare your food, prepare your home for the day of rest. And it's just another way to practice and get prepared so that when that day comes, you have what you need. It's already ready, if you will. So, preparation is a lifestyle. Prepping is a lifestyle. And I ask you to follow me along as I read to you, and you can follow along so that we know where your hearts and your mind need to be so that we are prepared. So we read in Proverbs 6, verse 6, "Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider her ways and be wise, which having no captain, overseer, or ruler, provides her supplies in the summer, and gathers her food in the harvest. How long will you slumber, O sluggard? When will you rise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall your poverty come on you like a prowler, and your need like an armed man." And right there, the ants don't, if you think about ants don't do too much in the winter. They look for food, they get the food, they store it up, they stock it up, and they put it in their tunnels and their dens, and they eat it all winter long. And when you see the sun coming out in the spring and the rains start to come and the ground warms up, here come the ants again. There are millions of them in a pile of ants. And there they are again, because they had enough food to get through even the harshest winters. There they are again in the spring. So, just another little bit of information. God believes in preparing not only your heart, but your home for what is to come. So we find ourselves in Proverbs chapter 21, verse 20. There is a desirable treasure and an oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man squanders it. So the foolish man has had the treasure or the oil stored up, but has been using it when it wasn't necessary and just using it at his will. When it came time for it, he didn't have what he needed. And this will lead on into some other verses that we've got. And basically, this is a verse that when I read it, it says to me that we need to be stocking up, storing up things, not necessarily food or water, or in this case, oil. We should be doing that, but I think it's symbolic of storing up the Word of God in our heart, storing up His knowledge. There may come a day when we don't have access to written words. And so if we can store all this information up, we can pull it out and use it when we need it, just like the oil. So now we find ourselves in Proverbs chapter 3. We'll find ourselves in verses 5 through 6, and we may go just a little bit more. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. It will be health to your flesh and strength to your bones. And, in the world of prepping where people rely on all the stuff they have, and we've shown you some videos about things and food and all that stuff, those are preparation things. But at some point, it's going to come, I believe, where we can't rely on just what we've done on our own. It's not going to be just what I've done. We will have to rely on the Lord when he provides what he provides when we need it. And so that kind of goes along with this whole channel. I lean a lot on God here for the messages that he wants me to put out. And my understanding may not be your understanding. And okay, so we find ourselves now, and this is kind of where this is about preparing our hearts and preparing our minds. Because in this day and age, just like it was back in biblical times, people may or may not necessarily agree with the governing authorities. It states in here, in the Bible, that God puts these authorities over you. And just because we don't like them, that doesn't necessarily mean that, let's just read it. Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same, for he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is God's minister, an avenger, to execute wrath on him who practices evil. Therefore, you must be subject not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because of this, you also pay taxes, for they are God's ministers, attending continually to this very thing. We're talking about the priests. Render therefore to all their due, taxes to whom taxes are due, customs to whom customs are due, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. Owe no one anything except to love one another, for he who loves another has fulfilled the law. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet, and if there is any other commandment, are all summed up in this saying, namely, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. And do this, knowing the time that now it is high time to awake out of sleep, for now our salvation is nearer than when we first believed. The night is far spent, the day is at hand. Therefore, let us cast off the works of darkness and let us put on the armor of light. Let us walk properly, as in the day, not in revelry and drunkenness, not in lewdness and lust, not in strife and envy, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ, and make no provision for the flesh to fulfill its lusts. So, this is really about, the way I read it is, we'll just say the government we have now, they're going to tax us, they're going to take it, give to Caesar's what is Caesar's, that kind of thing. But the fact of the matter is, ultimately our authority, the authority is God, and everything placed over us is from God, whether it be for judgment or whether it be for good, good happy times, if you will. That's how I understand this, and maybe I'm wrong. We can discuss this in the comments, but the fact of the matter is, it's about preparing your heart and being ready for His return. And during those times, we need to follow what the Torah says and what God's law says. Love your neighbor as yourself. That is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, things we can do. Love your neighbor as yourself. And, when it comes to being prepared, that goes a long way, man. That really goes a long, long way. If your neighbor needs help cutting down a tree or, having trouble with some food and water, maybe you ought to bring them over something. If they have a need, yeah, because guess what? Maybe you'll have a need down the road and they'll be able to help you out with it. I personally have witnessed this. I personally have done this, and I have personally been the subject of the guy needing a little bit of help. And you know what? It's my neighbor loving me as I love my neighbor. Wow. That's big. And that's very important when it comes to prepping, because you gotta love your neighbor as yourself. We find ourselves in chapter 24 of Matthew. Then Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said to them, Do you not see all these things? Assuredly, I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another, that shall not be thrown down. Now, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age. And Jesus answered and said to them, Take heed that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and I will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to the nations, and then the end will come. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go down to take anything out of his house, and let him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. And pray that your flight may not be in winter or on the Shabbat, or Sabbath here. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been seen since the beginning of the world until this time. No, nor ever shall be. That's the big one. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Then, if anyone says to you, Look, here is the Christ, or there, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. Therefore, if they say to you, Look, he is in the desert, do not go out. Or look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For wherever, and there's the thunder, for wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth leaves, you should know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near at the doors. Assuredly, I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then two men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. Two men will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and the other left. Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming. But know this, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore, you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. For then, who then is a faithful and wise servant whom his master made ruler over his household to give them food in due season? Blessed is the servant whom his master, when he comes, will find so doing. Assuredly, I say to you that he will make him ruler over all his goods. But if that evil servant says in his heart, my master is delaying his coming, and begins to beat his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and at an hour that he is not aware of, and will cut him in two, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is an encouraging passage that we need to have our hearts set on God, our minds set on God, and preparing them for the day that we don't know the day or time. We have been looking into here at TRS the Zadokite calendar, and it's probably the best version of the calendar of time throughout time that I have found. And I'm not a scholar on this. It's just the best thing that we can find so far. And even then, it doesn't show when the day or the time is going to be. We have an idea, but that's it. So, in the meantime, between now, when you're watching this video, and the time that Yeshua returns from the coming on the clouds, we need to have our hearts, minds, and houses prepared for him to return. And it even says right here in verse 45, who then is the faithful and wise servant whom his master has made ruler over his household to give them food in due season? When you need the food's going to be there. If you've stored it up, if you've listened to God and done that. That's what I think. There's a lot of things in here that are up for discussion, but in fact, God himself tells us to be prepared in more than one way. That is confirmation to me. And I don't want to be a part of the weeping and gnashing of teeth. It just sounds awful. And if that's not enough to get you going the right way. So now we find ourselves in Matthew chapter 25. This is, as I previously discussed, this is the parable of the 10 virgins. And essentially we're going to find these people were all at the place where they needed to be, at the time they needed to be, but they didn't have the preparations for when they needed it. Then the kingdom of heaven shall be likened to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. Now 5 of them were wise, and 5 were foolish. Foolish is a bad word in the Bible. You don't want to be the foolish man. Just saying. Those who were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them. But the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. But while the bridegroom was delayed, they all slumbered and slept. And at midnight a cry was heard, Behold, the bridegroom is coming. Go out to meet him. Then all those virgins arose, trimmed their lamps, and the foolish said to the wise, Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out. But the wise answered, saying, No, lest there should be enough for us and you, but go rather to those who sell and buy for yourselves. And while they went to buy, the bridegroom and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding, and the door was shut. Afterward, the other virgins came also, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. But he answered and said, As surely I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming. Again, we need to be prepared. It's flashing off the page here. Now we find ourselves in 2 Timothy. And this is pretty important, especially for someone like me. I need to hear this. I charge you, therefore, before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who will judge the living and the dead at his appearing and his kingdom. Preach the word. Be ready in season and out of season. Convince, rebuke, exhort, and with all long suffering and teaching. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires, because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers. And they will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables. But you be watchful in all things, endure afflictions, do the work of an evangelist, fulfill your ministry, for I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. Finally, there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day, and not to me only, but also to all who have loved his appearing. So, what we're talking about here, what this says to me, is that at some point in time, even back here in 2 Timothy, during this time, people didn't want to hear about the Lord anymore. They wanted to hear other things. They wanted to hear whatever it was that sounded good, whatever made them feel right, whatever made them feel good. Does that sound familiar to what's going on in this day and age? Okay, that completes part 2. I hope you found this information. I hope you found it pertinent to the place where you're at or the place that you want to be. I hope that this finds you healthy, and I hope that this is encouraging to you that if you are God's people, He is looking out for you. He is going to take care of you. He is giving you right now the things that you need to be ready for Him to come. And if you want to, leave us a comment down below, like or dislike, it doesn't matter. Hit us up down here. If you want to, hit us up on our Facebook page. Give us some comments on the original link to this video. That would be awesome too. And I'll see you in part 3.